there were Indigenous systems of law and governance that were on these lands prior to contact, that those are legitimate and authoritative. Those laws have authority and that they exist very much still today. They're there, although we don't always see them because they've buried under all these other layers of things.
Indigenous people have raised oral versions of the treaty as being essential to the full understanding of the treaty relationship, is that those promises that are made, those sacred promises that are confirmed through ceremonies, through offering of tobacco, through the smoking of the pipe, all of those things, those are procedural legal elements that come to reinforce the sacredness and the legally binding promises that were made in the context of those negotiations.
Most times the environment or water or something is object, right? Something that's to be protected or whatnot, but to speak of it in relational terms, where water is literally our first ancestor or something that we're related to in a very intimate and particular way, I think I hope anyways, create a shift. I think if we understood things in that way, we'd be more inclined to offer more care and protections than we currently do.
Regardless of whether you are in a territory where there's treaty or if there isn't an agreement that's in place with the Crown, the fact remains that Indigenous nations are the ones responsible for their territories. They have inherent rights within their territories. They are sovereign and self-determining, and that relationships need to be built on a nation-to-nation basis.
My work on revitalizing Indigenous law really tries to think about not just decolonizing Canadian law, for instance, but rethinking what does it mean to exist in this world and to live in relationship with all that's around us, because that's really how I'm trying to think of Indigenous law and what that is all about.
There is a very deep-rooted connection to these lands and waters, and at no point throughout history were the rights entitled to these lands relinquished in any way or fashion. Our ancestors were buried on this land. The responsibilities to these lands and waters are inherent. We have very sophisticated ancestral knowledge systems that hold, in very comprehensive sets of policies and procedures and guidelines and principles. And we need to conduct ourselves in accordance with those.
We all want clean water. We all want clean air. We all want land that is sustainable for us and for future generations. How do we get there? Part of that is looking to Indigenous practices and knowledges to help inform how we're going to conduct ourselves.
We call this our original instructions. We come to the natural world, we come to the earth with these instructions that we are to be caretakers of the land. And so when you see Indigenous people on the front lines of these protest movements for gas and pipelines and waters, that's what we're doing, is we are enacting our original instructions. That's what we're here to do.
Our Coast Salish laws were here, and they were very much of value, and they were very comprehensive and sophisticated. And just because they weren't written in a book in black and white in a colonized fashion does not mean they were not present and that they are not real. These were holders of knowledge. These were our laws. They're held in this weaving.
I look around and I say, okay, in these spaces, there's already Indigenous governance, there's already Indigenous law, there's stories, like this all comes out of the land itself and Indigenous people's relationships with the land that, that have been operating for, since time immemorial. And it's been, these well-developed systems of governance and law and the worldviews and all of that. And so it's saying, that's the sovereignty of this place, is all of those things. And then how do I fit within it? How do I live in a way that respects those things? Where I learn about those things and then I try to live within them in the most respectful way that I can.
Where the Crown has generally failed to recognize Indigenous forms of governance, there's an opportunity now to flip and acknowledge the importance of how Indigenous people have maintained relationships with lands and territories for extended periods of time, millennia.
You can start to structure your life in the way that that makes sense to you, to follow and to uphold those elements of care, and also to try and create space where Indigenous peoples can step into as well, where some of these forms of law and governance can take shape again.
You know, in certain worldviews and in Indigenous laws, you're placing at the center not humans, but you're placing right at the center the land or the water, and those things, or future generations, you're placing those in places of priority in decision making. And I think that removing that human element becomes incredibly important in thinking about how we're going to navigate these relationships.